Good morning and welcome to the Driller Newscast, a weekly update on the news and stories impacting the water well and industrial drilling industry. Episode 16 is brought to you by TDH Manufacturing. TDH pump hoists are built to work as hard as you do, made with the latest technologies to deliver the power and precise handling required on today's job sites. TDH will provide superior performance and unmatched versatility day in and day out. Thank you, TDH, for being industry innovators. I'm your host, Brock Yordy, and here's the news that's impacting our industry this week. In the first week of June, the federal government released a program to distribute $60 million among 12 states that have waterways that flow into the Mississippi River to help them control farm runoff and other pollutants that contribute to a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. Next, the Defense Production Act has been enabled to boost the American production of critical technologies necessary to lower energy costs, support the clean energy economy, and strengthen national security. That's heat pumps, folks. Our main story is a conversation with Dave Bowers on evaluating new hires and new hires evaluating drilling companies. But before we dive into the news, let's talk some safety. For this week's safety topic, I want to talk about the new hire and safety and our safety culture. And so the first thing we think about is, do they have their OSHA 10 or their OSHA 30? And then how old was that? But really, what does our safety program look like? If you look at the statistics of injuries, it's that first 2 to 5 years when individuals get hurt, or at the end of their career when they're complacent or very comfortable in the job. So when we think about these things, I want us to think about how we really perform in the field. Not what we tell the office, senior management, the owner how we perform, or that we all signed something that said safety starts with me. No. Do we really do what we say we're going to do and we acknowledge? Do we jump out of the truck and put all our PPE on and start the day properly? What steps? What tailgate meetings are we having? What precautions do we talk about? That new hire is going to do exactly what our culture and our leaders in the field are going to do. And that can be at-risk behavior, from not wearing fall protection to climb a derrick, or jumping down in a pit for just a minute thinking, I don't need that air gas monitor, I'm just jumping down to check the pressure switch and I'm going to get right back out. OSHA has the Focus 4 for a reason: falls, electrocution, caught in between, and struck by. And on top of that, we have confined space and excavations that are very scary for us. And these are things that we need to consider. So I want to ask you, foremans, right now, do we have a safety mindset and a safety culture? Or do we have a safety facade? And we say, oh yeah, they gave us this book, and this is the book on how we're supposed to do our JSAs or our procedures, but they don't know how we do it and they wrote it. Well, it's because we didn't participate in writing it. We didn't have that discussion with them. We didn't get that hazard analysis or that job safety analysis together with everybody and discuss if this is the way we do it or how are we really doing it and what is the at-risk behavior on the way we do things. It's up to us how we want to end the week, end the day, end the year, and who's healthy and who's still working for us. And when we have that moment where Spidey sense says, I don't feel good in the situations I'm in, we need to have that discussion. We need to be able to safely stop work at any time, and we need to do it the right way. So do you have a safety culture or a safety facade? Be safe. It's getting hot out there. Watch for lightning, insects, snakes. And now on to the news this week that is affecting the drilling industry. The federal government released a statement last week that it will distribute $60 million among 12 states that have waterways that flow into the Mississippi River to help them control farm runoff and other pollutants that contribute to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. This is coming directly from the Waters of the United States discussions. The money comes from the infrastructure law. Radhika Fox, EPA Assistant Administrator for Water, made the announcement with Iowa Secretary of Agriculture Mike Naig in Des Moines, Iowa. The Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico watershed is an iconic ecosystem that millions of Americans depend on for drinking water, agriculture, recreation, and economic development. And it is essential that we reduce the nutrient pollution that harms water quality. That came from Fox. Naig is the co-chairman of the 12-member Mississippi River Gulf of Mexico Watershed Nutrient Task Force. It was designed to cut the amount of phosphorus and nitrogen that flows from the rivers and streams into the Mississippi River and causes the Gulf's dead zone. In the Gulf, the nutrients feed an overgrowth of algae that eventually die and sink to the bottom, using up oxygen from the ocean floor as they decompose. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration said this month that the dead zone this year is expected to be about 5,364 square miles, which would be about 15% smaller than last year. In 2001, the task force set a long-term goal of reducing the dead zone or the hypoxic area to 1,900 square miles, which is about 35% of its current average area. The $60 million will be distributed over the next 5 years. Each of the 12 states will receive $965,000 the first and the fifth year, and 2, 3, 4 years, $748,000. The states are Arkansas, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Ohio, Tennessee, and Wisconsin. This is exactly coming from the Waters of the United States roundtables, what we've been discussing. If you watched the second roundtable or the third roundtable that was very agricultural heavy, they discussed runoff, the nutrients, the nitrates, the phosphates that are going down the river, going through these streams, through ephemeral streams, and heading down the Mississippi and polluting groundwater along the way. This is a great thing. The EPA memorandum that provided guidance for how states could use the funds. It includes buying agricultural equipment such as crop seeders that can be shareable across thousands of acres, deploying remote sensing tools to help identify critical sources of contaminants. Again, during the WOTUS roundtables, we've talked about how we're not testing often enough, implementing continuous real-time water quality monitoring, and developing or revising numeric nutrient criteria and water quality standards. Money can also be used for farmer-led education, training, demonstration of on-farm methods to retain nutrients in the soil. We had the gentleman in episode 2 of the roundtable where he said he knew exactly where all his nutrients were within a square foot. And he was from Iowa. It says, Iowa is often criticized because it has a voluntary nutrient reduction strategy that allows farmers to decide whether they want to implement measures that could reduce farm runoff of fertilizer, nitrate, and other water contaminants. Hugh Espy, the executive director of the environmental group Iowa CCI, said the funding isn't likely to make a big difference until Iowa develops policies that stop the rapid growth of livestock confinement barns that house millions of chickens and hogs. The next WOTUS roundtable is June 21st from 1 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's the Natural Resource Defense Council hosted for the Northeast. This is a big discussion, and this is great that these fundings have come out and we're going to get into some education. We need farming. We need to be able to feed our country and the rest of the world, but we also need to realize the impact that we have from this runoff. Next, we jump from the EPA to the White House and the Department of Energy. The White House last week issued a presidential determination providing the U.S. Department of Energy with the authority to utilize the Defense Production Act to accelerate domestic production of 5 key energy technologies: solar, transformers and electric grid components, heat pumps, which is what we need, geothermal drillers, insulation, and electrolyzers, fuel cells, and platinum group metals. The Defense Production Act determinations are part of the Biden-Harris administration's plan to lower energy costs for families, strengthen national security, and achieve lasting American energy independence that reduces demand for fossil fuels and bolsters our clean energy economy. Demand for clean energy technologies such as solar panels, heat pumps, and electrolyzers for hydrogen has increased significantly as the cost of these technologies have plummeted over the last decade. As the world transitions to a clean energy economy, global demand for these essential products and components is set to skyrocket by 400 to 600% over the next several decades. Unless the U.S. expands new manufacturing, processing, and installation capacity, we will be forced to continue to rely on clean energy imports, exposing the nation to supply chain vulnerabilities while simultaneously missing out on the enormous job opportunities associated with the energy transition. We just saw New York Governor Hochul do some great things with the Skill Bridge program for the United States military and superconductors. We have all sorts of great things happening right now. The Defense Production Act Authority, with the necessary funding appropriated by Congress, will allow the federal government to invest in companies that can build clean energy facilities, expand clean energy manufacturing, process clean energy components, and install clean energy technologies for consumers. In episode 12, we cover the Department of Energy's new office, Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains, to secure energy supply chains needed in modernizing America's energy infrastructure and in support the full transition to clean energy. That's where we talked about why we're going to increase mine production and the entire reason that what the state of New York is doing, from New York City changing how buildings can be built from 2023 to 2028 to get rid of fossil fuels, to the great things we see with New York Geo and NYSERDA and them leading the way, and the rest of the states that are coming on board with how important it is for us to harness as much green energy as possible. The Department of Energy will also partner with the energy and utility industry, labor unions, and community groups to explore a variety of options on supply chain issues, including through the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council. This is big. Electrification, harnessing wind, solar, the utilization of ground source heat pumps, what we heard last week with the Department of Energy and IGSPA. Everything that's going on is very exciting. And as water well drillers, if we have time, we have a second rig, we have a crew, we want to invest, we want to diversify, we need to be doing as much geothermal as possible. And it all comes back to independent estimates indicate that we need to expand electricity transmission systems by 60% by 2030 and may need to triple it by 2050 to meet the country's increase in renewable generation and expanding electrification needs. This is great news. The Defense Production Act can do a lot of great things. Now we got to see if they're going to team up with Climate Master and Water Furnace and all of our great champions that we have out there pushing for us to have HVAC companies teaming up with drillers. This is great news, and this is just another step towards our net zero for 2050. And if you don't see how the waters of the United States and clean energy and climate change and the massive rains we're seeing and the heat swing we just went from in the Midwest and the Northeast of the mid 70s to now 90s and 100-degree temperatures, this is a big deal. And when we have these massive rains, the ground can only absorb 1 to 3 inches, and the rest of it is runoff. We got to get control over our greenhouse gases, and this is a big deal. And we need to continue to follow it. And we need to be part of the geothermal industry and is drilling as much as possible. If you're going to the National Groundwater Show this December in Las Vegas, show up a couple days early and take part of the IGSPA conference. Get signed up. You should become an IGSPA member. You should become a part of your state membership for geothermal. This is what we need to have happen. For our featured story of the week, we're going to continue the discussion of hiring the next generation of driller assistant, pump technician, the next body that we need to continue to progress our industry. And to continue this conversation, I've brought on the contributing writer, Dave Bowers, great friend of mine, also happens to be the lead instructor and the driver of the Local 150 Operators Union drilling program. And he sees a lot of young men and women and bodies come through, and he evaluates. And I thought it'd be great to have a great conversation with Dave about this. Dave, how are you doing?
I'm doing fabulously, Brock. How are you?
I am doing great as well. So I just want to jump right into it. When you bring in a group for Preapprentice, what qualities do you really look for that either by the end of the week, those are the type of individuals that as the years go on, you see them come back and you know that they're productive for drilling companies, or you know, by golly, these are people we need to develop and continue to have in our industry?
Well, I think that the biggest thing is just they've got to have some sort of drive, and the drive has to come from within. And people who are raised well have that drive within. But I think our industry occasionally, forgets that um, this job is a little more technical. We remember as drillers, we remember the feeling that we get that when we completed a job, that water's coming out of the ground, that that project's done. We've just, and we have that pride. Well, we forget that that helper doesn't see that all the time. So what we really have to evaluate is how well do they listen? How well do they want it? We get mired down and they don't want to do the work. Okay, well, have we explained to them why the work's important? Uh, they still got to be willing to get dirty and all those things, but is there enough there for them? And I think that's where uh, occasionally our industry wants to make the same deal that I took, right? Which I think now looking back 30 years ago, I wasn't very bright when I took the deal. Hey, we're not going to pay you very much, but it's going to be rewarding. Well, okay, was it rewarding? Yeah. Could it have paid better? Certainly it could have, but I didn't have the options then that the young people now have. Uh, Pay itself can be gotten in a lot of different places. So what we have to look for is how do we get, hey, we're going to make this fulfilling for you. Here's how we're going to help you fulfill what we expect of you. And here's what you're going to get out of it, both monetarily and you know, uh, like we've said before, there's no better feeling than if you get somebody you turn or you do a pump job, you're able to turn their water back on for them, or you finish a project. The pride that comes with it, you did a good job. But we too often forget. We all say, "Oh yeah, Joel, there's a lot of challenges," but challenges aren't the stuff that you remember. But if you remember as a helper when you were brand new and those quote unquote challenges happened and the job really got sucky, that's where it tested your mettle, and how you were treated in those instances may have been the difference between that you wanted to stay in this industry and didn't.
I couldn't agree more. If we look at the numbers, there's 166 million Americans in our job force. When we drill down into that, only 7.6 million are in construction. And then we go smaller, it's 1%, half a percent that are actually in industrial drilling or water well.
I can
And
I can talk a little bit about, can I talk just a little bit about that?
absolutely.
In our area, and we're talking, the area I cover is northern Illinois, northern Indiana, northeast Iowa. We'll bring in 400 general operator apprentices this year for running bulldozers and cranes and different, all the dirt and hoisting and portable work. We might, for the drilling industry, bring in 25, right? And those 25 are going to be asked to work a lot harder than those 400 are going to be asked to work. So when you start to evaluate them, you start to look at them, what you're looking at is, you know, uh, can they follow directions? Are they willing to do the work? All those things we hear the complaints about. And what I've found is if they can see the path forward, and I talked a little bit about this in the opening, if they see a path forward, it doesn't seem to be that hard to find heck, as young as just out of high school, they're harder to get into the program in general because the lack of life experience. But we've had a few very young 19, 20-year-old people come in and do wonderfully. I've had some post college graduates come in that maybe what they got a degree in college didn't work out the way they were hoping it would, and did really well. A few Division I athletes that thought they were I'm going to the big league, and well, that doesn't work out well, and do really well once they see the upside of this industry and what you can really do, and the pride you can have, and in our area the financial reward. There's a pretty substantial financial reward uh in our area, and can be in most areas. I think too often we have a race to the bottom because we're looking for, that guy across town is going to cut me on price, so I need to keep my price low. If I do a better job than him, I'm going to get the work anyway. That's my belief.
That's another great point. And of that, 7.6 million that are in the construction industry, when you look at from electrician to plumber, some of the infrastructure trades, they have insurance, they have 401k, they're working big projects, and insurance is expensive, and it's a part of life as you transition out of mom and dad's. It's something we all need, and it's a tough aspect with when we're looking at the value of water, or we're looking at the value of drilling, and all too often we hear drilling's the most expensive component to X, but without drilling, nothing else progresses.
Well, you're right, and I really think part of this whole conversation is we have to start believing that we are as important as every other one of these skilled trades that don't maybe have the same level of uh, importance that our trade does, right? Think about it. Without our trade, be it water well or geotechnical, uh, nothing else can go forward. Without geotechnical reports, you can't build that building. Without water, no one can move into that building. Yet we constantly undervalue ourselves, and I think industry wide, it's a problem. And as long as we're still doing that, we're going to struggle to get top talent. Because if we're undervaluing our companies are then by proxy undervaluing their employees.
Agreed. So drive is a key indicator. We have the federal infrastructure law, so I know you being in the third largest city in the country, you're screaming for every individual possible to come into the program right now. What other qualities?
Oh, like I said, drive's a big one, but it's not just that, right? We evaluate before we do, though. We have to first do a little training. So you have to give them some background. Here's what I expect you to do. How well do you follow directions? How well can you apply the concepts of drilling that we lay forward for you? Uh, Very simple things, but the stuff that make you score better or worse tend to be uh, the very simple things, right? The biggest thing, and every contractor out there is their problem, is this thing right here, right? Can they stay off of this thing? We don't take it away from them. But if you're on it, you better have notified us there's some sort of emergency or something where you're gonna need to take a phone call, or that's gonna. But what we try and do is we try to look at all the things. Can they be on time? All of those things that are going to be important to the contractor, and we evaluate that for 2 weeks with them, uh, and score them and say, okay, well, this person uh, did well on all these things. They have a lot of drive. Their attitude is spectacular. We right now have a young lady in this last group that we did that uh, her attitude is so great. I- I've never had somebody as positive about doing something that might be, hey, shovel out that mud tub. Okay, and she's on it, right? And it's almost a little puts you back because you're like, I don't understand how someone could be so positive about that task, but she's so into succeeding and she wants so badly to get this, she's willing. Uh, and from what I can tell from some of the people I've talked to that have worked with her a little more, she just has that positive attitude at all. Even when it got hard for her to where she started to struggle and you could see kind of the doubt creep in, you could almost see her recalibrate her mind and then throw herself back into something. And you know, that's what I think there's an advantage of doing what we're doing, having an apprenticeship that over the next 4 years, these people are going to learn everything that they're willing to learn. I have them for 3 weeks their first year and 2 weeks every other year, but some other driller out there has them for the other 50 weeks. So anything they're willing to learn over that period of time, they're going to pick up. And I have a gentleman just about to turn 21 that just did his first drilling proficiency test. Uh, and he's done very little of the type of drilling he did a proficiency test in the field, but he's so engaged that uh, I I don't think I've ever scored a test that went better than his test. And I've had some 15 and 20-year journey workers run that same test and just the enthusiasm. So sometimes it's just finding the right thing. And I get when we put out for applications, you know, uh, I get a fair amount, but not tons, right? I might get 150 applications for those 20 spots. And then we go through those and there's an interview process. There's a lot of things. So the contractor, once they have to start paying one of these people, they've been vetted. They have an idea what they should be doing. And, you know, I think it really helps in the long run with get a better quality of driller out there, someone that wants to make the industry work.
So you said, yeah, positivity doesn't seem like something we ever see on any construction site. The same as a young lady, less than 5% of the construction industry is women, and we're talking about 21-year-olds being, smart and proficient. You said you have them for 2 to 3 weeks and then they're with the contractor. Advice for quality contractors to be able to retain these people that are out professionally developing.
Well, my advice is it comes down to really kind of what I said in my first statement, right? That new person coming to you, you have to have a game plan for them and lay it out at the beginning. Say, this is where you're starting. Here's where I would like you to be every 4 months, 6 months, whatever it is. Here are the parameters you have to meet. And the most important part of that, here's how we at the company, we at the union, whatever the case may be, are going to help you meet those parameters so that they may be looking and say, man, this is an awful lot to learn, right? You're asking me I've got to get a class A CDL and I have to, I might have to get my state license in a year and I may have to do it. But if you lay out to them, this is how we're going to go about it. And then they have to be held accountable to stick to it. And you, as the contractor, have to hold yourself accountable to help them the way that you said you would. That's why, uh, you know, my system I use with proficiency testing and classroom and stuff, it's not that much that you could bring something like that in-house in your company, and maybe scale it down and say, oh, hey, I need someone that really understands the solids control system by time they're uh, in their 6 month of working with us. And then say, here's, we're gonna teach them mud testing, we're gonna teach them all about the solids control systems, about maintenance of it, and this or that. And then at some point there's going to be a exam, uh, even on the job, where an experienced driller goes through with them and checks off that yes, they know it. And then that should lead to, maybe when they get that and some other things, their next pay bump, or at least their next step up from being an entry level to, becoming helper level 2, or whatever the case may be. That's my advice: is give them something to shoot for, so that they want to professionally develop.
I think that's a perfect point to wrap. Expectations and goals are 100% what we're all working for, regardless of we've been doing it a year, 5 years, or 20 years. And it's something as a tribal industry that has been very much family driven, and all of the guidance and feedback came at the dinner table or at Thanksgiving or at a time when mom didn't want that to be the conversation that's happening. We need to figure out how to communicate those things and expect them to professional develop with us on site and with YouTubes and podcasts and articles when it comes to safety. Dave, with his latest on HAZCOM or fall protection or confined spaces, has been a champion for our industry on that, as well as talking about modifying equipment and sharing his professional experiences. And it's what we need to do, is we need to tell that story. And that's why Dave started writing for the Driller, and we became great friends and colleagues, and he teaches at the NGWA, and you teach every day, and it's one of those great things. So thank you, Dave.
Well, I have a goal right now. I'm hoping to someday become a better podcast guest, but I don't know if it's happening.
You're a fantastic guest and a host. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Brock.
I'd like to thank you for joining us for episode 16, brought to you by TDH Manufacturing. Give Scott and Cade and the team in Texas there at TDH a call. They got excellent pump hoist and pump servicing equipment. Every vision and feature that TDH has engineered is with one goal in mind: to enable the contractor to increase their revenue simply because their pump hoist is more efficient. Thank you, TDH, for being excellent innovators and for helping us bring the news and a featured story every week. I want to thank Dave Bowers for coming on and discussing looking at new hires and how new hires look at companies and what we need to be doing to just get more bodies and good people into our industry. Be paying attention to what's happening with the waters of the United States and the EPA and all of the impacts that surface water is having, that ultimately is hitting our groundwater, because we're all connected. And be paying attention to all of the great green energy and net zero initiatives that are out there, and how we as an industry can be drilling water wells, we can be doing cathodic, and we absolutely need to be out there drilling geothermal. Be safe. Have a great week.